Judge, it's good to see you again here.
Yes, thank you.
You've joined other prosecutors from across the country in an effort to hold federal officials accountable when they exceed their lawful authority.
Yes.
I've heard this from local officials in Minneapolis and Los Angeles. They have tried to do the same thing. What are you hoping to do if some of these same situations unfold here in Texas?
Well, it's kind of a multifaceted approach. First of all, we want to get together and recognize what we have in common. And some of the jurisdictions that are in this group are smaller jurisdictions and they don't have the resources. We do. So what we're trying to do is raise money so that they have money available in case they need expert witnesses, travel, etc. Okay? That's the first thing. The second thing is we want to really talk about this and put this on the table from a legal and moral standpoint. Because what we're seeing is potentially illegal behavior and perhaps murder. And ordinarily,
From Minneapolis, from
Minneapolis, yes, 2 cases in Minneapolis. Yeah. And ordinarily, we would be working hand in hand with federal authorities, except the administration is making excuses and saying that these people were terrorists, etc. And we just don't see that in the video. So what we're hoping to do is to bring the volume down, especially on the federal side, because by telling these officers they have absolute immunity, that's not true. They can be prosecuted. They can be prosecuted in federal court if somebody's doing their job, okay? And they certainly can be prosecuted under some circumstances in state court. So what we want to do is get the word out. We hope that they listen to it and that they hear it and they tone down their behavior. The other thing is that you see now that members of Congress are upset about it and talking about it and trying to make changes. The other thing, and I don't know if you noticed this, but there's a group of police chiefs, I don't know if it's a national or what, but they too have come out and said, look, this is corrosive behavior. Not only is it wrong, potentially wrong and illegal, but everything that we've done to build up trust in the communities that we live in, you all are knocking it down. And you need to stop this behavior. This is not what we train people to do. This is not what is acceptable. You need to stop. So I think there's a lot of things coming together on this. We just happen to be the first group to stand up and say enough is enough.
Judge, let me start with this here. Are you prepared to prosecute federal agents if you think they broke the law?
If I have enough evidence, yes.
Do you think they broke the law in Minneapolis, based on what you've seen?
Based on what I've seen and what the administration said happened, they don't appear to be aligned very well at all, okay? And based on what I've seen, I think there's a possibility that there was a crime committed.
Have your colleagues in Minneapolis or Los Angeles, where we've also seen a lot of aggressive behavior from federal agents, have they talked about local charges or state charges?
There's talk about it, yes, but right now there's no cooperation. We would prefer to have cooperation.
And you need cooperation to see the evidence and to interview witnesses, stuff
interview
like that,
witnesses, right? Get the witnesses' names, get the covers off their faces, learn who they are, who was in what position, and things like that.
But if you don't get that, I mean, would a case really go anywhere?
I think that's an interesting point. So some of us were talking about that. Do we have enough, or would there be enough based on what you saw? So let's take the young man, the nurse on the street, okay? Clearly the gun has been taken away from him, all right? And clearly his hands are out and down and not in a threatening position. Somebody shoots him once and then multiple shots go off. Yes, I think that a plausible case could be made that that's a homicide, that's a murder, okay? The other woman, when it slowed down, and actually we know this because of your profession and slowing down all of these videos, okay? So when you see that the car is turning to the right, the officer's already crossed in front of the car and has actually got a foot or two between him and the car and shoots into the car and kills her. So I think there's enough to go forward. Would we want to go forward without all that other evidence? No, of course not.
How would you go forward, though, if you can't get the agent names, if you can't get
ballistics
and stuff like that?
Well, ballistics would be, that's an interesting thing. We may not have the firearm, and we don't necessarily need the firearm because it's all on video. But you may be able to get the projectiles from the body of these people, depending on where they went. And usually when these kinds of things happen, the entity that's going to investigate it as a crime scene is going to be the local police, not ICE. Right. They have no training to do that. So the local police, the medical examiner's office, et cetera, will come in and do the investigation, and that's a state agency.
How would this work if a local entity decided to bring state charges against a federal agent without cooperation from the federal government? That seems like it would be setting up something maybe unprecedented here.
It would be, and that's why I say I hope that we don't get there. And I see that the tone in Congress is changing, and I see that they have replaced, I think it's Bovino, replaced him, and apparently Mr. Holman is coming down to come in, and hopefully we'll see some level of cooperation. I think it will be difficult, but not impossible, to prosecute the case without federal cooperation.
The name of the group that you've helped start here is called Fight Against Federal Overreach. The abbreviation? FAFO. That's not lost on me and anybody on social media there.
Well, actually, it was lost on me.
Was it? Okay, all right. What's the message, though, you want to send with this?
Well, the message I want to send with FAFO is that we really are fighting federal overreach, okay? And this type of behavior is beyond anything we've ever seen in recent times in America. Now, you can go back to, post-World War I in Washington when Pershing used troops and all of that stuff. But recent times, we haven't seen this. And the level that it's coming from the president to the various secretaries, undersecretaries, and what have you, is just unprecedented. And what it's doing is telling these men and maybe women that they're okay, that we have your back, and that you can do this, and we're going to cover for you. In fact, we're going to create an entirely new narrative of how this went down. But the problem is, today with cell phones, etc., I think what the administration is doing, unfortunately, is losing the confidence of the American people by saying these things, and yet we have video that shows that it's not true.
Yeah, no question on that's why Bovino left, I believe. Let me ask you this, though. If federal authorities decline to cooperate, what leverage would you or any other county prosecutor have to bring state charges against a federal agent?
Well, we could issue subpoenas, but then they would have a superior right, and they could come in and quash the subpoena, so it wouldn't do a whole lot of good. But once again, I want to remind you, who's the ME work for? Not for the federal
medical
government.
Examiner, yeah.
Works for the county
Sure.
or the state. And who does the crime scene? Local police or sheriffs, okay? Or maybe a state investigative agency. So there's a lot of evidence, and then all of the video is available, okay? And the people who took the video presumably would be available. So you could put together a case. And then what you would have, you would indict that person, and that person would have to come to state court to go to trial. Now there may be some, I've seen where there's some law that maybe they can have it removed to a federal court, but I think that would be a long shot. I think that they'd wind up in state court.
So they might be able to quash the subpoena because of being employed by the federal government?
Being federal government,
They
yes.
can't stop an indictment if
No.
the grand jury gives it to you?
No.
Okay. Your group is going to be meeting here very soon, early February. What's the meeting going to be about? What specific actions or statements should we be looking for after that?
I think that this will be the first meeting, okay, other than just a coming together meeting. And I have not seen the agenda yet, okay?
Yeah.
And I think it's actually this Friday, and it may be in Minneapolis. I'm not certain where it is. I won't be able to make it because I have a campaign. But I think it's just where are we? What can we do? I guess they're going to look to see how much money has come in and what can be done. Once again, there's a lot of conversation on what can we do with what we have, with the video and all of the forensic evidence that may have already been gathered in Minneapolis. I think that'll probably be a lot of it.
Is the point of the group to marshal resources for some of these smaller entities and to maybe send a statement that we're united here, prosecutors are united
well, number
in
one,
pursuing illegal acts?
Number one, send a statement. Okay. Number two, marshal resources. For example, in Dallas County, I have more than enough resources if I needed to prosecute a case. Okay. But there are other jurisdictions in here that are much smaller. They have 4 or 5 prosecutors, and they don't have much of a police force. And so the necessity for experts, use of force experts, self-defense experts, things like that, they would need that where they don't ordinarily have these types of cases. So they don't have a bevy of experts, so to speak, to use. And they could call us and find out. We could do a countrywide, nationwide search for them to see and vet people who they come up with. And of course, just talk about how to try a particular case.
If nothing changes federally, what's your next move?
Well, my next move is to support this. Federally, I don't know that there's much that I personally can do.
But it looks like they're
Vote.
right. It looks like the Trump administration is de-escalating because of
I think so.
the vast public outcry,
Yes.
even from many on the right.
Yes.
Is that enough to get you guys to stand down?
No, we're not going to stand down. No, I seriously doubt that. Because talk about de-escalation and actually de-escalating are two different things. Talk about cooperation and actually cooperating, actually doing an investigation, making witnesses available, and letting the cards fall on the table as they should. Those are different things than talk. So it's going to have to be more than talk for any of us to stand down.
Do you expect any state charges in Minnesota over the Alex Preddy or Renee Good shootings?
You know, I really don't know. I haven't, other than just this organizational conversation, I haven't really delved into it, so I don't know.
Okay.
And I don't know what their self-defense laws are.
Sure.
You know, in Texas, it looks like it's a plausible case, okay?
Yeah.
But in Minnesota, I have no idea.
Let me ask you about juvenile detention. Dallas County
Yeah.
struggled for quite a while to improve conditions and improve practices over there. You guys have made some headway here, though, because there
Yes.
are a lot fewer youth offenders inside Dallas County juvenile detention than before. Give us the numbers. How is this working?
So let's go back to 2021 and 2022. I was looking at cases where I was asked to seek certification from the staff to go to a judge and see if we could certify this particular kid as an adult, usually for murder or capital murder. That's all we kind of limited it to. And what I was seeing was a pattern, and that they were in and out of the juvenile justice system, and that their referrals had been made to various and sundry places, but they were getting worse and worse. So that begs the question, are we doing this right? So we, the DA's office, actually hired an academic to come in, and with the cooperation of the juvenile department, and took our numbers, took their numbers and state numbers, and matched it all up, and did a process chart, process evaluation. And what we found was that we were really not doing it very well at all. It had no focus on the actual needs of the children. It was more offense-based as opposed to needs-based, which is not a modern practice. And then we were keeping kids locked up extraordinarily long time, 6 months, and then letting them go home on probation when we could have done it in 1 week or 2 weeks. And so obviously that type of behavior from us, keeping them locked up, creates recidivism. Now, the thing that got the news was the conditions inside the facility, but that wasn't part of the study. So while your colleagues in journalism were reporting on that, we were still working on the process. So today, instead of having 200 kids a day in the facility, we have about 70 to 80. Okay, it fluctuates between those two numbers. And we do more diversion. We do more meaningful diversion. We have the cooperation of several of the police agencies to take the kids, like if they get into some kind of a scrap at school, to let the school or the family take care of it instead of bringing them to us and we lock them up. The other thing is we were filing formal charges on 91% of the children, and that's just excessive. There's no need to do that. And so we have reduced all of that. We have come back in line with best practices for juveniles. And what we're actually seeing, though it hasn't gone long enough for us to start putting numbers together and comparing, is we're seeing fewer cases where we need to seek certification or even think about it, okay? We think we're seeing fewer juvenile murders, but it'll take a while, maybe another year. We'll have to look back and see what the flow of time over 2 or 3 years looks like before we can come to any conclusions. But preliminarily, we think it looks very good right now.
You guys were filing charges against 91%?
Were,
yeah, you were. What is it now?
I don't know.
But it's substantially less than that?
Yes, yes. You know, we have some software problems over there.
I've heard about that, yeah.
Yeah, and so I don't know exactly what it is. We are still working for a final study, and the academic is the same one that I hired back in 2021 and 2022. She's working on that, so we'll have those numbers hopefully in the next couple of months.
And then last thing, you mentioned diversion. Where are these kids being diverted to if they're not going to the detention center?
So that's a good question. So when you say diversion, it doesn't really mean anything if you don't send them to a place that has a meaningful impact on what their needs are, okay? So one of the evaluations that we were not doing very well or paying attention to was called a risk needs. What level of risk are you to reoffend, and what are your needs? How can we solve that and lower your risk to reoffend? And so what was going on is kids were just being put in places without really understanding what the entity, the nonprofit, whatever it was going to deliver. And so that's why I was seeing kids getting a case, being referred out, picking up another case, being referred out, and back and forth until the fourth or fifth time they shot and killed somebody. Because there was no focus on what were the needs, and did the facility or the referral, did it meet those needs? Did it address those needs? And if you don't understand that and practice that, you're not going to reduce recidivism.
But were those judges doing that, or prosecutors petitioning for, let's just move this case to this place?
I'm sorry, go ahead and ask.
No, I mean, that was the question. Who was sending them to these places where they may not be receptive to whatever the nonprofits are offering?
I think it was mostly the juvenile department, but with us too, okay. And the judges. I mean, the judges are signing the paperwork. When you file formal paperwork on 91% of the kids, the judges are going to have to sign the paperwork. The judges are actually now, they have fewer cases, but the more important cases, the more violent cases. And so it gives them more time to deal with children who have more needs. And so it's starting to work a little, the balance is getting better. So the kids, for example, like if you were going down a particular street and you got a ticket, you probably would never speed down that street again. You're called a self-corrector, okay? Well, many kids are. They get caught at doing something, or they get in some bad scrape or bad position, they lash out, they hit somebody. Did they commit an assault? Yes. Will they do it again? No. Do we need to lock them up? No. And so being able to discern all this about a child through these evaluations, that's what we were missing. We were doing the evaluations, but we weren't paying attention to what it told us.
Gotcha. Judge, good to see you again. Thanks for the time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
Good stuff.